Michael Landon spent decades as television's most trusted father figure, and audiences believed they knew him completely. The warm smile, the steady guidance, the moral compass he embodied on shows like Little House on the Prairie made him feel less like an actor and more like family. What viewers didn't see was the man carrying wounds so deep that no amount of fame could heal them, and when his daughter Leslie finally spoke about what he never addressed publicly, the revelation changed everything people thought they understood about his life. Eugene Maurice Orowitz entered the world on October 31, 1936 in Queens, New York, born into a household already fractured by religious conflict and resentment. Eli Maurice Orowitz, his father, worked as a Jewish theater manager and actor, while Peggy O'Neill, his mother, came from an Irish Catholic background where she'd performed as a dancer and comedian. Their marriage became a battleground, with Peggy making no secret of her bitterness toward her husband's faith, and young Eugene absorbed that hostility in ways that scarred him permanently. During his bar mitzvah, a moment meant to affirm his Jewish identity, Peggy leaned close and whispered that she'd secretly baptized him as an infant, deliberately invalidating the ceremony unfolding before him. That act of rejection planted itself in his memory and never left. Mental illness ravaged Peggy's stability, and the family endured cycles of emotional chaos that left Eugene terrified and helpless. He witnessed his mother in states of severe distress, moments when she endangered herself, and the weight of those scenes followed him into adulthood. Chronic bedwetting developed as his body responded to the constant stress, but instead of compassion, Peggy hung his soiled sheets outside the bedroom window where neighbors could see them. Public humiliation became another layer of trauma for a boy who had no refuge anywhere, not even in his own home. Years later, he channeled that pain into The Loneliest Runner, a 1976 film he wrote and directed about a boy suffering the same shame, and the project revealed just how deeply those childhood wounds had cut. Athletics offered Eugene his first taste of control and self-worth. Javelin throwing became his escape, and he excelled enough to earn a scholarship to the University of Southern California. That scholarship felt like salvation, a path away from the chaos waiting at home, but a shoulder injury destroyed everything. The athletic career vanished overnight, and with it went the structure and purpose he'd built his hopes around. Lost and desperate for direction, he took odd jobs, including a shift at a gas station near Warner Brothers, and that's when a talent agent noticed him. The encounter changed the trajectory of his entire life, but first came a symbolic transformation. He opened a phone book, chose the name Michael Landon, and buried Eugene Orowitz forever. His breakout role arrived in 1957 with I Was a Teenage Werewolf, a cult horror film that got people's attention, and in 1959, he landed the part that made him a household name. Little Joe Cartwright on Bonanza turned Landon into one of television's most recognizable faces, his rugged charm and emotional depth connecting with millions of viewers who tuned in week after week. When Bonanza ended in 1973, he transitioned seamlessly into creating Little House on the Prairie, a values-driven series that reached families across generations for 9 seasons. Highway to Heaven followed in 1984, casting him as an angel sent to help people through their darkest moments, and the role suited him perfectly because playing a moral guide let him offer the healing he'd never received himself. Fame brought adulation, but never erased the demons he carried. Landon became a heavy smoker and struggled with alcohol, using both to dull anxiety and silence the racing thoughts that never stopped. Colleagues noticed his obsessive need to control every detail on set, his perfectionism bordering on compulsion, and some recognized it as his way of creating order in a life that had begun in chaos. Work became the one area where outcomes could be managed, where he held power, and he threw himself into it relentlessly. In 1959, the same year Bonanza premiered, his father died suddenly of a heart attack, and the timing crushed him. Just as his career was taking off, He lost the chance for any reconciliation with a complicated man who'd been part of that painful childhood, and the regret lingered. Tragedy struck again in 1973 when his daughter Cheryl, whom he'd adopted and loved as his own, survived a horrific car crash that killed her boyfriend. Landon sat by her hospital bed through surgeries and recovery, holding her hand through the worst of it. And according to Cheryl, he made a promise during those dark nights. If she pulled through, he would create something meaningful from their shared pain. And years later, Highway to Heaven became that fulfillment, born from a vow between father and daughter. The public saw generosity and kindness, but people who worked closely with Landon described a different side. His temper could flare without warning, shifting from playful encouragement to cutting impatience in moments, and the pressure he placed on everyone around him sometimes became unbearable. Allison Arngrim, who appeared on Little House on the Prairie, once called him mad, bad, and dangerous to know. Words that shocked fans who'd only seen the warm father figure on screen. The contradiction was impossible to ignore for those who knew both versions of the man. Everything crumbled publicly in the early 1980s when news broke about his relationship with Cindy Clerico, an aspiring actress who was just 18 when she started working on the set. Landon was in his early 40s, married, and a father to several children, but the connection grew serious and eventually impossible to hide. In 1982, he ended his nearly 20-year marriage to Lynn No, and the divorce devastated not just his family, but millions of fans who'd believed his real life matched his on-screen persona. The betrayal felt personal to audiences who'd trusted him, and his perfect image collapsed overnight. The affair wasn't just a private decision, but a direct assault on the credibility he'd spent decades building. April 1991 brought a different kind of devastation. Severe stomach pain sent Landon to doctors expecting news of an ulcer or something manageable, but what he received instead was a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer that had already spread to his liver and lymph nodes. At that stage, no cure existed, and for a man who'd overcome trauma, setbacks, and scandal through sheer willpower, this enemy wouldn't negotiate. He began chemotherapy, explored holistic treatments and experimental therapies, consulted alternative medicine experts, and adjusted his diet, but even the most aggressive interventions offered only temporary relief. In May 1991, Landon made one final public appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Weight loss had transformed his appearance, and though his humor remained intact, sadness filled his eyes in a way viewers had never seen before. He spoke candidly about his illness, expressed gratitude for the support he'd received, and emphasized staying strong even when facing the unimaginable. That honesty touched millions who'd grown up with him as a constant presence in their living rooms, a reminder that even heroes can hurt. On July 1, 1991, Michael Landon died at his Malibu ranch at age 54. The news sent grief rippling across the country because he'd been part of people's lives for decades, not just as an actor but as a symbol of comfort and stability. His funeral remained private, and he was laid to rest at Hillside Memorial Park Cemetery in Culver City, away from the public eye that had followed him for so long. Years after his death, Leslie Landon, who became a psychologist, finally spoke about what the world never knew. Her father had avoided doctors regularly and dismissed warning signs that something was wrong, pushing through discomfort instead of addressing it. In one emotional interview, she said, "I think if my dad were alive today, he would say, 'Boy, I blew it.'" Those words carried the weight of regret and hard-earned understanding because Leslie believed early detection might have saved him. She now uses her platform to encourage people to prioritize their health, to recognize that strength sometimes means knowing when to ask for help. Michael Landon Jr. became a producer and director, creating family-oriented content that echoes his father's emotionally rich storytelling. Christopher Landon built a career in horror and thrillers, directing films like Happy Death Day and Freaky. Jennifer Landon, who plays Teeter on Yellowstone, has earned acclaim for her gritty performance and credits her father with inspiring her work ethic and passion for acting. Cheryl Landon wrote a memoir titled I Promised My Dad, reflecting on their unique bond and the vow he made during her recovery that eventually became Highway to Heaven. The legacy isn't simple or spotless, but it's human, shaped by a man who carried trauma from childhood into every success he achieved and every mistake he made. His children preserve that memory not by pretending he was perfect, but by honoring the intentions behind his flaws and the love that drove him even when he fell short.